Welcome, everybody, to our session about what's new with the tooling for Spring, Grails, and the cloud. Before we really get started, we would like to introduce ourselves briefly, and therefore I hand over to Andy.
Yeah, I'm Andy Clement. I work in the Vancouver lab, and I oversee the things that go into the Groovy Grails tool suite. So Groovy, Grails, Gradle. I also project lead AspectJ, and we look after HEDT there as well.
I'm Martin Lippert. I also work for the same team, and I'm mostly responsible for the Spring tool suite, so the Spring part of the tooling. Spring IDE, Spring tool suite, and also a little bit responsible for the Cloud Foundry tooling for Eclipse.
And I'm Andrew Eisenberg, and that's a picture of me from my younger and hairier days over there. I also work in the Vancouver office, and I'm the project lead for Groovy Eclipse, and I do the editing support in the Grails IDE along with AspectJ development tools and a bunch of other things.
Okay, thanks. So before we start, obviously the usual disclaimer about we don't promise anything, but I guess most of the stuff that we're showing here, I think everything that we are showing here, and some of the stuff that's coming up next, it's already available in the latest builds, in the latest releases, in the version of STS and GGTS that we released just a week ago, version 3.01. So nothing really secret we are talking about here. What are we going to do with this talk? Because we're working on a lot of different tooling projects and a lot of different targets, like Grails tooling, Groovy tooling, Spring tooling, tooling for Cloud Foundry, tooling for TC Server. This talk is also being kind of componentized a little bit. So we have different sections for this talk talking about these different toolings that we are implementing and then we are realizing. So we'll start with an overview about what we changed for the whole tooling projects. Some kind of general project infrastructure that does not really give you new features or things like that, but it talks about the structure of projects and what we changed there, and there's some big and I think awesome changes happened there. Then we will continue with the second slot, talking about the Spring world, the tooling for Spring. Then we have in the middle a very brief section quickly going over through some changes and news for the Cloud Foundry integration for Eclipse. But I guess if you're interested in Cloud Foundry, you also went to the Cloud Foundry talks here at Spring 1, and I guess you might have seen all the great tooling that we did for Eclipse already in those talks, because Jennifer and Ramnivas, they are always using these Eclipse plugin for Cloud Foundry and showed you all the great things. So I will very briefly go over what has changed there. Then the third section, or biggest section, after the Cloud Foundry tooling, I'll hand over to Andy and Andrew. They will talk about Groovy, Grails, and Gradle. That section. And in the end, some summary. So I hope you don't get bored in those sections that are not really your focus on talking about this project maybe you're not yet using. But it reflects this kind of new componentized thing and new different separate tooling components that we are providing nicely, I think. So in the past, I guess maybe I should ask you, who used Spring Source Tool Suite in the past, or is using that? Most all of you? Awesome. For Spring stuff? For Groovy Grails? Okay, that's good. So in the past, it was these, let's say, more or less one big project called Spring Source Tool Suite that contained everything like Eclipse and came with Spring tooling. And if you want to get additional stuff, you could install that from the dashboard, like Groovy Grails tooling or Gradle tooling. And the base core thing, like the base core Spring stuff, was open sourced. There was Spring IDE, or what most people know as Spring IDE. But the big Spring Source Tool Suite was under a commercial license, was free to use. But everything mostly integrated somehow into this big commercial component. And while we were thinking about moving from the STS2.x versions up to the STS 3.0 versions, we thought we should change something there. We should make this project, we should split this bigger commercial project into smaller projects, into smaller components that you can use individually. And that is one big step forward that we realized for STS 3.0 that was released in August this year. So we split up the whole Spring Source tool suite into a bunch of smaller components. Everything that is related to Spring tooling is now part of the Spring IDE project. That's a component project, comes with several features that you can install into an existing Eclipse, or that you can use for using this Spring tool suite, of course. But that project contains everything that is related to Spring tooling. It contains stuff that was previously open sourced as Spring IDE in the past, but it also now contains all the commercially or previously commercially extensions to the Spring IDE, like support for Spring Roo, and additional quick fixes, additional refactoring support, all that stuff. It all gets, it's all now part of the Spring IDE project. The Grails tooling is now part of the Grails IDE project. This is a separate component. It has no dependencies on Spring IDE, so you can use it completely individually, completely separately. You can use Grails IDE and install that into your existing Eclipse installation, for example. It's completely independent. Contains everything that's related to Grails tooling. And as a third thing, we also extracted the support and integration for TC Server. That was also previously baked into the Spring Source tool suite. It's also now an individual consumable, an individually usable project called the TC Server integration for Eclipse. So you don't need Spring tooling if you just want to use the TC Server support in Eclipse. You can just install that part. Right? Again, no dependencies on the other things. The Gradle integration, relatively fresh new project that we did. Support for the Gradle build system. It's also some kind of individual new single project that you can consume individually. And of course the Cloud Foundry integration for Eclipse. Those are the five big projects that we are now have split out into these separate components that you can use together. You can use everything, of course. You can install everything into your Eclipse installation. Or you can use each, you can just pick what you want. You don't get all the other stuff with it automatically. And that I think is of course we're used to this kind of plugin development and then doing componentized projects and things like that. So we really like to have these modularized and smaller individual independent components now. And it also brings a benefit to use because you can use just the stuff that you really want. You don't need to install everything, right? So that is a really, I think, a really big step forward. In addition to that, we open sourced everything. Everything that was under the commercial license before is now licensed under EPL and part of those open source projects. And all those projects are now hosted on GitHub. So you find everything on GitHub under the Spring Source organization. All those projects are there. And you can, it's all open source now, right? No commercial license anymore, even though it was usable for free before, but it's really now completely open. You can watch every commit that we are doing for those projects. You can follow and watch exactly what we're doing in all those projects all the time. It's completely fully open and transparent now. And of course, because it's now open source on GitHub, it makes it also easy for you to contribute stuff back if you want. So if you would like to change that, if you would like to implement your own feature, please feel free to check those out, check out those projects, work on them, and contribute stuff with pull requests. It would be awesome. Very, very welcome to join us in our work on these projects. I said there are these small individual components, and you can install them into your existing Eclipse installation. But of course, the big distribution did not go away. We still provide a distribution that contains everything that you need ready to use out of the box. Just download, install, go. But we are now able, because of these small individual components, to provide you a better suited set of tooling for your needs. So if you want to do Spring development, you can download the Spring tool suite. And the Spring tool suite contains everything that you need to do Spring stuff. So ready-to-use Eclipse installation, pre-installed Spring IDE stuff, pre-installed TC server integration, pre-installed Git integration, Maven support for Eclipse. Everything mostly contains the things that were previously installed in the Spring Source tool suite. So this is the successor of the Spring Source tool suite. It's now called Spring tool suite because it's really exactly providing you the stuff that you should use, or you can use, or you would like to use to do Spring development. In addition to that, we are now providing a second distribution called the Groovy Grails tool suite. And that contains everything that you need to do Groovy development and Grails development. So again, ready to use package, just download, install, and you're ready to go. As previously for the Spring Source tool suite, those distributions also contain the runtimes like TC Server Developer Edition. The Spring tool suite contains a RU runtime, so it's all packaged and then ready to use for you. All those things are built on usually on the latest Eclipse Enterprise Edition distributions, and in the end, just a ready-to-use combination of all those open source projects that I talked about before. Right? It's just the combining everything together. They don't need to install everything yourself, and a little bit of branding on top of that. So as an overview, that looks like this. Right? We have an Eclipse JE package as a base foundation. We have the Maven integration and our additions to the Maven integration for WTP and AJDT already installed. The project are coming from Eclipse. And Myelin and eGit is also already included in those packages. Then we have the Eclipse Integration Commons project. That's what I haven't mentioned before because it's more a technical single component and single project where we are putting everything into that we are using from different projects together, right? So reusing existing components that we are reusing, for example, Spring IDE, stuff that we are and at the same time reusing in the Grails IDE. We put those things in some kind of commons project, right? That's in there everywhere. And on the Spring tool suite side, on the left side, it's Spring IDE and TC server integration. In the middle, Groovy Grails tool suite with Grails IDE, the Groovy Eclipse, so the Groovy language tooling for Eclipse, and also TC server integration. And on the right side, not included in the distributions, but you can easily add that to an existing distribution, of course, the Gradle integration for Eclipse. This is just these predefined packages that we think are good for you to go, right? If you're not happy with our choices, you can, of course, install all the other components in addition to that, right? If you say, I would like to have this big IDE that does everything that is possible in the world, you can, of course, for example, download Spring Tool Suite and from the dashboard that I guess you're familiar with, install the Grails IDE and the Groovy Eclipse tooling and the Gradle tooling as well. And then you have everything, right? And vice versa, of course. You can also start with the Groovy Grails tool suite and install the Spring IDE into that. Very, very easy. In this picture, when I talked about the latest and greatest Eclipse distribution that we are packaging together with our tool suites, you see there's a little notion of Eclipse 4.2 and Eclipse 3.8. What's that about? Usually, our policy is we always ship an STS and GGTS version quickly after an Eclipse release. Means the major Eclipse release in the summer, the service release 1 in September, end of September, and the service release 2 in end of February. So usually our STS and GGTS releases, you will see them coming out in July, coming out beginning of October, coming out beginning of March. That is our release cycle. And that's what we did in the past, and that is what we will continue to do over the next years. Or year, at least. Maybe I should not promise something for the next 10 years or so. I don't know what will happen. we do this to give you always the latest and greatest Eclipse version, right? So you're not lagging behind saying, oh, I would like to use the Spring tool suite, but oh, they are being built on a 5 years old Eclipse version, and I would like to use the latest Java tooling from Eclipse together with that. You always get the latest Eclipse release together with with our tool suites. The latest release in Eclipse changed a lot. The Juno release in September changed a lot because Eclipse decided, the Eclipse Foundation decided to switch the main distributions that they are shipping based on a new UI implementation. They changed the UI, the internal UI implementation, from the 3x stream to the 4x stream. Some kind of rewrite of their UI to provide better customization, having a much better technical foundation for the UI, providing better capabilities if you're doing RCP development and things like that. So it's technically a much better platform than before, much more maintainable and so on. But it's still kind of in the, even though it's already 4.2, it's kind of in the early stages. So what we did is we, of course, shipped on top of that platform UI, of this new platform UI. You might notice that with some kind of, it looks here and there a little bit different, not much, but a little bit. But people reported that there are still some issues with that platform. Some people are reporting performance issues. Oh, it is behaving more sluggish than before. Some key bindings are not really working as expected, maybe. And there's a lot of discussion going on in the Eclipse community about these performance issues with the new UI platform. And the Eclipse team is working very hard fixing those issues. So for the SR1 release, it came out with already a few issues fixed, and next one will fix more, and so on. But it's still, for some people, not working as nicely as the old UI. And therefore, we decided to ship the tool suite distributions on both versions of the Eclipse platform UI. So if you go to the download pages, you will notice we ship STS as well as GGTS based on Eclipse Juno 4.2, containing the new UI. And if you, for example, would like to use additional APIs that are already requiring 4.2, for example, you should go with that distribution. But at the same time, we also ship Eclipse, our distribution based on Eclipse Juno 3.8. The 3.8 stream is not an older version or some kind of, oh yeah, that's the stuff that is 3 years old or so. It's the same release, but it contains the old UI implementation, not the new UI implementation. Right? Java tooling features, all the other features are exactly the same between those two base versions of Eclipse. It's just the implementation of the platform UI that has changed. And for most people who have performance issues or trouble using the new version because of additional plugins or because of the way they're using it or because of whatever, they're usually happy using the same distribution based on Eclipse 3.8. So that's what I can recommend to you if you observe problems or you would like to are used to the old UI. You can use that, because our goal is to always provide the best user experience that we can. Therefore, we are providing these two distributions. Update sites are, of course, our compatibility story. So, of course, you can also use the previous Eclipse version. So if you don't want to update to 3.8 or 4.2, you can also go with the Eclipse 3.7 version, the Indigo version, and install STS from update or GGTS from update sites. That's always there for compatibility. So we have now 3 compatibility update sites: 4.2, 3.8, and 3.7. Don't be surprised. And that will be the same for the next STS version that comes out in beginning of March, right? Based on the Juno SR2 release. So it will be based on 4.2.2 and 3.8.2. Good. That was the first part, talking a little bit about the changes in our project infrastructure and what we worked on mostly for the 3.0 and 3.1 release in terms of how to structure the project and how to make it better consumable for you and how to make the code base better and doing some kind of housekeeping of the code base as well. Next, we are entering the section about the Spring tool suite and the Spring tooling. The Spring tool suite, as I said, based on Java Eclipse JE package, contains Spring IDE, vFabric integration, Maven integration, and Git integration, kind of ready-to-use package that should be suitable for most of the people out there. I will briefly go over what's new and noteworthy since the previous releases that we did. First thing is we are continuously trying to improve our support for additional Spring projects, and one of the most important Spring projects that are out there and being improved all the time is, of course, Spring Data. So we started to support Spring Data directly in the IDE. So if you are working with Spring Data, you will find now first versions of content assist and auto-completion when you're, for example, implementing repositories. Get some kind of validation for, say, find by, and the stuff is not there, and it does not really match your domain model, what you're implementing for the repository. You get some kind of validation, some kind of hint saying, hey, this maybe is not really what you're trying to do. And the Project Explorer shows you the repositories that you implemented and things like that. Some kind of early steps for Spring Data support, but sounds promising, and we will continue to improve that as well. The next thing is we are, as you might know, we have these graphical editors for Spring Batch, Spring Webflow, and Spring integration, and we are continuously updating that. So the latest update was for Spring 2.1, and we are at the moment already working on integrating Spring integration 2.2 and make those graphical editors updated for Spring integration 2.2 that is coming out shortly. So expect to see updates for that, and to get these new graphical editors or these existing graphical editors updated for always the latest Spring integration versions. The third thing is, I guess you're familiar with the template projects that we have. So if you would like to get started quickly with a project in the Spring Tool Suite, you can create a new project, not from scratch, but from a template. The template gives you kind of customization, so you can put in your own project name and customize the package structure and maybe some more stuff. But it gives you a ready-to-use starting point, for example, for a Spring MVC project or a Spring Batch project. And because people really like those template projects, we are trying to improve that, and we are trying to add more and more template projects over time. So freshly arrived template projects for Spring Data Gemfire. So if you're interested in using Gemfire together with Spring Data, we have now, I think, four different flavors of Spring Data Gemfire templates. Fairly easy to use. Don't need to download anything. Just go to the templates, select the right template you want to use, and you're ready to go. Really nice. We have also, for Spring integration, new template projects or updated template projects. And we are now also categorizing them, because if you are providing more and more template project and you get these kind of huge lists somewhere, it doesn't really make sense, right? So we have now categories like persistence, batch, integration, Gemfire, where you can select those templates from. And one nice thing is that we also improve the way you create your own templates, because now it is possible to not only use the template project that we are providing you, you can build your own template projects if you want. For example, you say, oh, in our company, our Spring projects, our Spring MVC project, or our Spring XYZ projects usually look like this and that. You can implement your own template, configure that in your IDE, say, okay, I would like to use this template as well, and then the template will show up in the dialog as well, which is quite nice. And we provide some good way to test that, but I will show you that. I will show you that nice thing. Yeah, a Spring Data Gemfire project. I always said that. I think. Oh yeah, I was right. 4 templates for Gemfire, for standalone thing, for WAR, flavor, for client and server things. Really nice templates. And aside of the template story, we also would like to make it easy to use an existing Spring example project. There are many example projects out there, but it was always a bit cumbersome to install them into your IDE, or I need to clone the Git repository and then import that, but which way should it import that? Is it ready to use Eclipse project or not? Things like that. And now it's really easy. You can just go to the dashboard, and the dashboard contains a section called example projects. And those are linked to existing projects on GitHub, and you can just click, for example, this Spring MVC showcase. You can just click, and that imports everything into your workspace, and everything is ready to use inside your workspace. Right? So there, from there, you can just have the exact sample projects in your workspace, and you can just run that in your TC server in 1 minute. Really easy to use. Really nice to get started. Good. Of course, I would like to show you some parts of that lively, and I think I will get started with the template story. And what I would like to show you is a template project that is inside my workspace, right? I have here, I'm reusing, I've stolen the Spring integration, one of the Spring integration template projects that the Spring integration guys are doing for us. And that's here in my workspace. Just a general Spring project in my workspace, right? Nothing really strange, nothing really artificial here. General Spring project. The only thing that is different is that I have these template XML and JSON, wizard JSON files here. Those are the metadata files that are describing what of this project is a template, why is it a template, how is a template called, what category is it, and so on. So, for example, in my template XML, I say, oh, this is my template is called Spring Integration Template. Let's change that. Say that's my Spring 1 to GX template, and the category is, of course, Spring 1 to GX, right? Wizard JSON contains more stuff about what I would like to customize, what I would like to show people that they can customize, like the package name or the artifact ID for a Maven project, things like that, when they create an actual project using this template. But the interesting thing is, how should I test this template, my test project, right? And usually what you do to create a new project from a template, you go to this new template project wizard dialog, and that's it, right? And then you see everything that you configured. So to test my project in my workspace now would be quite complicated to say, oh yeah, I do a build of this project, I put that up somewhere, I configure that in my Spring tool suite version to use that, and then it might show up. We provide an easier way to do that, what's called the self-hosting mode. So what I can do now is when I configure my templates, here I could configure all the templates that are available for my Spring tool suite instance here. I can also enable this self-hosting mode. And the self-hosting mode is there for helping you author and work and test and check your template project. Because what's happening now is the wizard also shows the Spring 1 GX category and the template project that is in my workspace. So some kind of a meta feature here. And I can try out my template that I'm working on directly in the same workspace. I don't need to start up a new Spring Tool Suite version. I don't need to do a build, don't need to do anything. I can just directly within the same workspace use that template and testing this. Let's see. And that creates a new project the same way as someone else would use your template project that you then provided maybe somewhere if it's done, right? Very, very easy way to author and especially test your templates. One thing is still missing a little bit. It's kind of export this template in this ready-to-use format when it's done. that's a feature planned for the next versions. But testing templates is now really, really easy. Good. Showing you the template stuff. And there is one feature that I haven't talked about that we've been working on with the Spring core team. And that is called the live beans graph. And that is really one of the, I think, one of the most amazing features that we have been working on over the past month, and that we are providing now in a very early, very sneak preview way of feature. But the live beans graph is completely new. The live beans graph feature in the Spring Tool Suite connects to a running Spring application and visualizes what beans are created in this lively running Spring application. So it has nothing really to do with the source code that you have in your workspace or trying to analyze the source code, trying to analyze your config files, whatever. It actually really visualizes what is going on in your lively running Spring application. And that is something that was never be possible before. Right? And I would like to show you that. Therefore, I have a Spring MVC application here. It's a relatively simple one. And in the TC server integration, and that feature is already available in the latest STS 3.10 version. So you can try that out yourself if you want. What is there in the TC server integration is a checkbox saying, I enable the live beans graph. Because you need to enable this when you start up the TC server. You cannot just connect to some arbitrary running application somewhere. You need to enable this when you start up the JVM, right? And I will start up the TC server, but it has nothing in there. So I deploy my MVC app, and that should be TC server should be picking up this the Spring MVC app. And what I see here now is a list of applications that are running in my TC server. And I can just double click that, and that shows you now graphically exactly the beans that are created and running in your live Spring application. It's not only showing you the individual beans with their names, it also shows you the dependencies between the beans. So which bean got used by which other bean? Which bean is injected into what other bean? Like the product manager here got injected into the home controller so that the home controller can use that. To give you some more details, we also provide some properties. For example, if you take a look at the home controller, you can see, oh, the bean name is home controller. Where is this bean defined? In which file is that defined? What kind of scope does a bean has? And what type? And if I, for example, double-click on the home controller, I come directly to the class that defined this home controller, because the home controller in this case is some kind of annotation-driven bean. So we are pointing you directly, if the project is in your workspace, of course, pointing you directly to the place where this got configured. Right? The unused product manager, for example, is configured in this Spring XML configuration, as you can see here. Right? In addition to that, we also provide you some kind of context information saying, okay, I would like to go to the bean definition. That was done with a double click, but I can also open the class that is used to implement this bean. Some kind of very, very early set of features here. We are planning to do a lot more for this live beans graph, especially also to make it possible to connect to some remote running Spring application. For example, if you have your test system running in some kind of integration environment and you're wondering, hey, why the hell is this data source being mocked out in my test environment? Something went wrong with my configuration. Why did it behave like that? You can connect this live beans graph to that application, see which beans are created really and running in my live integration system, and say, where's that bean defined? Where is that mock bean thing defined, in which context? You can jump to that and see directly oh, this contact got activated, or oh, I forgot the bean profiles definition in this bean definition. Really, really awesome, really promising, I think, and will also be possible to do that for applications that are not inside your workspace. Then, of course, you don't get these kind of navigation features because there's nothing to navigate to, but it will be possible. The only thing that you need to do to really use that inside your application is to use the latest Spring 3.2 version. Because we're using, that's why we worked with the Spring Core Framework team. There is some kind of API that is exposed by the Spring Core Framework that we can use to gather all these informations out of a running live system, and that is part of the latest snapshot builds for the Spring 3.2 thing. So that's it's not yet possible to just connect to running Spring 3.0 application using this feature. Good. Awesome. One of my favorite and most promising things. Oh yeah, question.
What does enabling live bean graph on the server actually add to your content startup?
The question is, what does this checkbox, this magic checkbox enable live beans graph actually do in real? It just sets a system property. I don't recall the exact name, but it's some kind of system property that's provided by the Spring Core Framework, and the Spring Core Framework just takes a look, oh, is the system property set to true? Then I expose in JMX bean, and that JMX bean is used by the tooling to connect to and to get the information out.
Do you see any reason why you might not want that enabled by default?
I could see a reason why not to enable that by default. For example, if you're running a system in production, things like that. In development, it should be possible to do that always. It, of course, adds some kind of extra memory usage or overhead to a running application. I think that overhead is very, very, very low because it just adds collect some additional information about where to find the beans and things like that, putting that into the meta model that was already there in the past as well. But it might also be not be possible to expose the JMX bean all the time because you're not allowed to expose the JMX bean and things like that. So there are a lot of reasons why maybe not to enable that by default by the core framework. But maybe in the tooling, if that stabilizes, we could do that. Yeah, sure.
What other things can you customize with your template projects? I mean, I saw you change the name of the template.
The question is what can I customize with my template projects? Basically, you can do everything, right? So the idea is the template projects, it's just a general project that you provide, right? And you can define, for example, what to replace in this project, and what should show up as customizable fields in the wizard. Like, oh, I would like to customize the project name, of course. Okay, I would like to customize the package structure. I would like to customize these qualifiers that are somewhere spread out of my files with these other qualifiers. So it's a fairly simple templating mechanism that is used under the hood to replace identifiers, replace strings, change packages, and things like that. But you can self-define how many stuff you would like to show up there.
Would it be a good analogy to the Maven archetype generator?
I'm not familiar enough with the Maven archetype generator to answer that question, but maybe we can come back to the question later. Guys, you take care of how much time is left for you? Sure. Yeah.
So when on the roadmap will it be available for the doing it for the remote server?
Actually, it is already available for the remote server, but it is difficult to use. What you can do is, the question is, when will that be available for the remote servers, this live beans graph thing? What you can do is you can just open a live beans graph view that's empty, and there's a menu saying connect to. And then you can connect to, and then you need to type in this JMX connection string yourself, which is not really intuitive, what you need to put in there, but it is possible. and then it would connect to that system somewhere. So it is already there, but it's not really easy to use.
And the other question was, on the roadmap, do you have something already planned to take a snapshot of live beans at different point in times of the server execution?
The question is there something planned for taking snapshots of beans from this live running application? I don't think so at the moment. We haven't thought about that, but since most of the stuff is static, it's not really dynamic, because Spring is just creating everything at startup, it should not change too much over time. Of course it could change, and I don't want to exclude that completely from our roadmap. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Would be interesting. So if you have any kind of suggestions for that, for the live beans graph, we are in the very early stages. Please feel free to submit Jira issues, enhancement requests for that. We are very, very happy to work with them. Yeah, the live beans. So the question is, does it work with any Tomcat version? The live beans graph is basically, as long as your Tomcat version is running an app with the Spring 3.2 thing, 3.2 library, the snapshots, and is able to expose the JMX beans, that should be possible. I haven't tried it out myself, but it should be possible. It does not really depend on the TC server version, the Tomcat version, whatever. The nice UI integration, which is enable and click, that is provided for TC server. For TC server 2.5, 2.6, 2.7, and TC server 2.8, and TC server comes with Tomcat 6 and 7, the latest versions. But if you would like to use it on a general Tomcat, not TC server, in general Tomcat, you could go the same way as I described before with manually connecting to that. Should be possible. I haven't tried it out myself yet. Very, very early, but it should be possible. And if you would like to try that out, let us know. We will let you know how to do that. Or I guess you will quickly figure that out yourself. It's very, very easy. I saw one more question over here before. Okay. So, getting back to some slides. That was a live beans graph. Cloud Foundry integration, the thing in the middle. I will not demo everything of the Cloud Foundry integration because Ramnivas and Jennifer did a great job of showing all those features in their talks. And I'm very happy to let those Cloud Foundry experts showing off all that with amazing applications. Therefore, I will just briefly describe, also to save some time here, what we did. Last Spring 1, we introduced the debugging for Micro Cloud Foundry so that you can deploy apps from your Eclipse installation into the Micro Cloud Foundry, and you can use a full debugging thing, which is really amazing. You can set breakpoints and everything. You can really use your IDE debugger to debug the application that is running on Cloud Foundry, on your Micro Cloud Foundry, on your laptop. Really awesome. And since then, we worked a lot on improving performance, of course. So that's some kind of ongoing theme. So showing the output on the console has improved performance dramatically. Updating your application, so changing a file and uploading the change, that improved dramatically. Really good. And we are continuously adding features for new features that are coming out on Cloud Foundry. Like it's now possible to very easily connect a tunnel to a service that is running on Cloud Foundry. Like I would like to connect or create a tunnel for the MySQL service that is running on cloudfoundry.com. I can just do that, right-click on the service in my Cloud Foundry integration for Eclipse, right-click, say Open Tunnel, and that's it, right? And then you have the tunnel open to the MySQL service. You can get passwords and usernames from there and things like that. Really, really easy to use, and you can also, of course, close that again, right? We also added support for standalone applications. So if you would like to bring your own container or running standalone applications on Cloud Foundry, it's very, very easy to deploy them now, because the integration takes care of collecting all the libraries that are necessary and shipping everything or putting everything into the app that is deployed on Cloud Foundry then. And we also added early support for the new V2 features of the Cloud Foundry, things that guess you heard in the Cloud Foundry talks the support for orgs and spaces and all that stuff that is coming up in the next versions of Cloud Foundry. That support is already in the latest versions of the Cloud Foundry Eclipse plugin. So whenever that becomes available on cloudfoundry.com, you'll be ready to use that from inside Eclipse. Good. Briefly chatted about Cloud Foundry Eclipse, and then I would like to hand over to Andy to guide us through the GG world.
Thanks, Martin. Quick projector laptop switch. So now we're going to spend a bit of time talking about the Groovy Grails tool suite, and then a little bit of time on the Gradle integration. So as Martin said, we created this. We found there were a lot of guys downloading STS. The first thing they slap in there is a Groovy and a Gradle, a Groovy and a Grails, and we thought, these guys are doing this all the time. Maybe we should make something available to those guys. We also had some problems because Groovy Eclipse patches JDT when you install it. If you happen to put your installed STS in a particular location, we couldn't do the patch because on Windows we wouldn't have permissions and things like that. So just to make that an entirely smooth experience, we said, let's create this distribution. And there's nothing special about the components in here. It's just as if you'd installed them from the dashboard yourself. We've just done it for you. You can install other things if you want to. We've tried to pare it down to a minimum, so there's no Spring IDE M2 Eclipse in there. And it comes in the 3.8 and 4.2 flavors. But what is actually in GGTS 3.10? So what we try to include is the latest production release of Grails. So if you've attended a Grails session this week, you may know that 2.2 isn't out yet. It's in release candidate stage. So we have included Grails 2.11. Grails 2.11 needs Groovy 1.8. So those are the versions that are inside. Yep. Grails is tied to a particular version of Groovy, and the Groovies aren't binary compatible, so I can see why that happens. But the question, I think, is more about why working in the tools is it so difficult to switch between project versions. And that is because, unlike JDT, where you have source and target flags, where you can say source 1.7, target 1.6, you can use the same compiler, and whatever versions you want to use, you should set to source and target. Groovy has nothing like that. So you're effectively using a brand new Groovy if you're doing 1.7, 1.8 or 2.0 compilation. And that means when we start up Eclipse, we load one of them. So you're kind of fixed at that level. Now we can address that problem and allow you to switch by introducing interfaces around the compiler. And then we could plug in a 1.8 or a 2.0 depending on what the project wanted. But it's a big piece of work. And we would effectively be patching Groovy to introduce those interfaces because it doesn't have them at the moment. So far we haven't taken that big step.
And also, every time you do that kind of indirection, there's always going to be a lot more. So
I know it's a pain point. It's a pain. It's a pain. We face it ourselves all the time. And that's why if you look at the Grails 2.2 support, if you want to, we package 1.8 and 2.11, as I said, but we are compatible with 2.2, and we continue to run with 1.3.7, whatever version you want. But if you want to try things out with Grails 2.2, GGTS is compatible, but you'll need to grab your own copy, and you'll need to install the Groovy 2.0 compiler, because that's what 2.2 prereqs. That's on the dashboard. You can just go and grab that. But then you do get into this situation where you have to manage the Groovy level for your workspace. And at the moment, we kind of recommend if you're going to have multiple levels, then have multiple workspaces. And keep your Groovy 1.8 projects in one workspace and your Groovy 2.0 in the other. It's kind of on the roadmap, but it's a big piece of work, and we keep putting it off. So I said we kind of picked the minimum set of components that could form GGTS. But if we get enough people shouting that whenever I download GGTS, I install the Gradle support, if enough people say that, we will start packaging that in as well. And if you shout really, really loudly and beg for it, we might even put Maven in there, but I'd rather not. So just let us know. If there's anything else on the dashboard as well, you find yourself always installing, let us know. If we hear enough people want it, then we will just include it in the distribution. So that's an overview of what's the kind of versions that are in there. So I'm now going to hand over to Andrew, who's going to give us a demo of the latest Groovy stuff and Grails stuff, and then I'll come back up to talk about the Gradle integration.
Thanks, Andy. So I'm going to talk about Groovy Eclipse and then Grails IDE. So we've done a lot of work on Groovy Eclipse this last year. Quite a bit, however, has been on the back end, and you can't really see it making the test run better. We moved to GitHub. We changed the build server, so now we can get feedback quicker, and the builds are a lot more stable. So it's great for us, but it doesn't affect you too much, or at least not directly. We also added Groovy 2.0 support, so I'll show you a bit of that. Also talking a bit about the question that you over there asked earlier regarding compiler levels. We do now have warnings on your project if you're running your Groovy project with the wrong compiler level, and I'll show you that as well. There are also lots of other editing and searching and inferencing enhancements that we added, so I'll show you a few of those too. So let's get on with it. So this is GGTS. Right now I am running with the Grails, the Groovy 2.04 compiler. So here's a very simple, let me comment that out. Here's a very simple class that just does a bunch of work. It's not entirely something that you would write on your own, but it just does a bunch of busy work. But this is something that you can imagine when you're making a lot of method calls. You can right-click and do run as Groovy script. This is not using compile static, and so you can see that when I run it like that, it takes a while, and to do all the computation, it took 2,943 milliseconds. Essentially, we're just calling a bunch of methods and doing things. And certain kinds of programs are quite like that. I can uncomment that, save it, and then I can run again. And now you can see that it takes a third of the time. So you can see that we do get quite a bit of benefit from the compile static in certain situations. And similarly over here, with the, so if I try to do, you can see that compile static is now working. You see now we get an error over here that the compile static is complaining that it's not working. So it doesn't know what a substring is on an integer. So if you want to change compiler levels, you can do so from the compiler preferences page over here, Groovy compiler. Click on the 186, and yes. And this will restart your GGTS. You can see we also have a bunch of new branding over here, a nice new splash screen to tell you exactly what you're using. Yeah?
Just takes a restart. You don't have to switch your workspace.
You do not have to switch your workspace, yes. If you want to, it's possible to have multiple workspaces open using multiple compiler levels. The way to do that, it would be to start up your workspace using a compiler flag. I don't have it on the notes right here, but you can look it up online, and after the talk, I could talk to you about that. And so, I mean, basically, this allows you to change compiler levels, but you can see here is that we get a little warning over there. The project still works. Now you also get an error bar for it no longer knows what compile static is. Let's get rid of that. You can still run your projects. It still compiles, but you just get a warning over there. If you look at the markers page, you see that there is a Groovy compiler mismatch. And if you right-click on it and go to Quick Fix, or just press Command 1, it tells you exactly what the problem is, that the workspace compiler level is 18x and the project compiler level is 2.0. There are three things you can do. You can configure the compiler level for the particular project, configure the compiler level for the entire workspace, which would require a restart as well, or just simply set the compiler level of this project to be whatever the workspace is. But I'll just show you what this does. So click on this one. Brings up the project preferences page, and it says over here it's 2.0. Just simply change it to 1.8. And the marker goes away. Now if I want to change it again, I just go to the project properties page, and I can switch around. So I've also done a bunch of nice editing work. So some things are quite nice to deal with. I have a little people project person over here. That's a very simple thing. It defines a bunch of fields, has a getter method over here. So we've done a bunch of work with looking for implicit properties and implicit getters. So if I do for first name, I can do a Command-Shift-G, a global search for it. You'll see that, of course, we find the first name that is inside of the G string, but we also find this over here. You can see that set first name. It's not, we realize now that set first name is actually resolves to first name of the person class. And similar with set last name. I can do a search from here, and again, we get exactly what you would expect. So, so where is it? Right here. Okay. And similarly, with get full name, I can do a global search for that, and inside of person script over here, you can see that we resolve get full name to the synthetic property full name. Again, and refactoring works exactly as you would expect. We support inline renaming, but for now, I will show you the dialog so you can see exactly what's going on here. So let's say we want to be a bit more British. We can change it from first name to given name. I want to look at the preview. We get a warning here because we're about to make a change that is not standard. So it says that, we found a potential match. Just take a look at this. This is expected. Click on continue, and you can see that exactly the places where you'd expect, inside of the G string, inside of the actual property itself, and the special one over here is going to be changed as well. Refactoring worked, and undo will work as well. So that's a very brief demo of what we've done so far in Groovy Eclipse. There's a bunch more things like compiler, method overloading we now support in type inferencing, or operator overloading, and lots of other small fixes like that. On to Grails IDE. We've done a bunch of work with importing. We've also done a bunch of work with Mavenization. So now you can work with Mavenized Grails projects. That was the most voted on issue in our issue tracker. It was a very interesting thing for me to work on because Grails is one world, Maven is another world, and they really don't like to work together that well. And especially when you introduce the Eclipse world as well. You have 3 separate spheres that all want to control everything. And just taming all 3 beasts at the same time was a lot of fun. And of course we have Grails 2.0 support. We have DSL, refactoring support, and searching support. All is in there. On to our Grails demo. So in the past, it was not always straightforward exactly how you want to import an existing Grails project into your workspace. Depending on whether or not there were already .project and .class path and other Eclipse metadata floating around, you would import it one way versus not having it all, you would import it a different way. But now we've changed it to being something a bit more straightforward. We have import. We have now a Grails import wizard. And I'm going to select my Grails project. And this will do everything already for you. This is a particular project. It's just something I checked out. And there is no Eclipse metadata right there, but several things have happened here. It recognizes that this is a Grails project. It recognizes that this Grails project uses 2.1, and it shows you that it chooses that version by default. You can, of course, configure a separate version, but you would get a warning up there. And you also have the option of copying this project into your workspace. But in this case, it's already physically located in my workspace, so I can't copy it. So just click on Finish. And there you go. It's as simple as that. A lot more straightforward. Takes all the guesswork on exactly how to import projects. And as I said, we also worked on Mavenized projects, so I'll show you how to work with them a bit. So over here, you can see that for some reason it wants to keep choosing this. I have a Grails project called Mavenization. Now you can see that there's an error marker when I try to use the Grails import wizard, but you see some helpful information down here. The selected project looks like a Mavenized project and should be imported using M2E's import existing Maven projects wizard. If you proceed with this wizard, the project may not be imported correctly. I could click here and import anyway using our standard Grails import wizard, but that's probably not what you want to do. You probably want to click on Switch to Maven Import. So I click that. It opens up the Maven Import wizard. If you don't have M2E installed, there's going to be another dialog saying that please install M2E and then continue. So right now, this is just a Maven project that happens to have the Grails plugin installed. This over here, it's asking that this is a Mavenized project, but it also looks like a Grails project. Do you want to continue? Do you want to convert it? So you click yes, and oh, there it is. You can see right now, it takes a little bit longer because not only are we refreshing, we're doing a bunch of Maven stuff, we're doing a bunch of Grails stuff. So you can see now that there is a little Grails icon and an M icon over there, and there's an error marker on it. So this means that it's both a Grails and a Maven project. See what exactly this marker means. Right, okay. So sometimes, as you can see over here, all we need to do is just, this is now a Maven project, so you need to work with some Maven features. So instead of running Grails refresh dependencies, you can see that is now disabled. So Maven is the thing that is trying to control the class path. So we want to update the project, and it will run a bunch. So what happens now is that it runs the few Maven goals to figure out exactly what the class path is, and it'll run a couple of Grails things to figure out a few more things, and everything fixes itself in the end. So as you can see here, we're now working with a Maven and Grails project, so things work a little bit differently. There are certain things that work the same, like you can see over here the Project Explorer makes it look like a Grails project. And if you right-click, things like the different kinds of wizards, like Create Domain class, will work as you expect. It just runs the Grails command. Something I didn't quite mention before, in order to use Mavenized projects in Eclipse, in GGTS, you must have the proper Grails install available. And this is how you will be able to run the Grails commands. You run against that particular Grails install. So we just created the class over there. Another thing that works as before is launching your project. So run app, test app, and your unit test will run as before. So just right-click Run As, JUnit Test, and it will run using the installed Grails version. Oh, right, I just created a new domain class, so this class will fail as expected. But there are some differences in how you interact with the project. So, for example, if you want to install a plugin, you typically would go to Grails Tools, Grails Plugin Manager, and it grabs all the plugins. But in this case, you don't work that way. you can get a list of all the plugins here, but it says project uses Maven, use the pom.xml to install and uninstall plugins. So I go to the POM. And if I want to install something, I just add that dependency. So this over here will install the feeds plugin. And once I do that, I just select, right-click, Maven Update Project, and this will download and install the project to the plugin into your project. So another difference between a Mavenized project and a regular Grails project is that the plugins are all stored in your own workspace rather than in the .grails folder. So you can see that there are now 2 plugins locations. This is the plugins folder, and it just shows the resources that are available and the file structure, whereas this icon over here shows the plugins as they look in more of a source area, in more of a source. You can see the sources, folders and packages and things like that. And just briefly, I'm going to show you a little bit of some of the editing support that we have now. So that's a bit of our Maven support. One of the nice features that we have now are support for named queries. So named queries is a new feature of Grails 2.0. You have a static field called named queries, takes a closure, and you define a bunch of queries in here. So here's the song class, or the song domain class that has a name, an artist, and duration. And I've defined a named query called long songs. Any song that is greater than 6 minutes is a long song. I could create a new class, a new query called short songs. And when I save it, you can see that now this has become a named query. You get content assist support. So I'm going to say any song that is less than, its duration is less than 60 seconds is a short song. And so you get a little content assist support inside of the named query, but also you get content assist support when you use that. So I'm going to test long songs. So we do song dot so you can see here, for one thing, we can navigate back to the long song, but also we can type dot and we get all the it's a dynamic finder now, so we can type find. So this will narrow down the long songs to something a bit more, if you want to further narrow it down. So you can find by and dynamically build up a query. Find by artist, like Sting. So this will find all long songs that have an artist whose name is Sting. So that's a very brief introduction to what we've done with our editing support with Grails IDE. We have support for all of the Grails 2.0 DSLs. I just don't have time to show everything, so I'm going to move it on to Andy, who's going to talk a bit about Gradle.
Thank you. Andrew. So that was Groovy and Grails. They're all packaged in the GGTS, but there is no Gradle integration in there at the moment. It's been componentized out alongside everything else. You can find it on Spring Source. The Gradle integration, we're actively tracking the Gradle releases as they come out. We do have an API. Unlike working with Grails, where we kind of call it directly, the Gradle team have created an API for us to use in the tooling. On one hand, that's great, because we have an API and they won't break us without us finding out. On the other hand, the API is quite slow to evolve. So sometimes we find there's a lot of features we need, and the Gradle team's very busy, and they don't get added to the API, and that can cause us problems. There's a few points there, better import options, editing support, but basically I'm going to dive into the demo so I can show you some of these. close some of these guys. So this is a GTTS, but we've installed the Grails IDE support from the dashboard. So I'm just going to show you a few things we can do in here. So we've got a new project wizard. If you just don't know where to start with Grails integration, you can just create a new Grails project. And to give you an idea of the structure, they provide some templates. And these templates for Grails projects, first two are provided by the Grails teams themselves, and then we've got one provided by the tooling. I don't think you can yet define your own, but that may be something we can look at. But I'm going to choose Java Quick Start just to create a simple Grails project. And you'll see it kind of looks like a Maven project, really, the structure for the source folders. Source main test, source test Java. You'll see there's Grails dependencies here. And like Maven dependencies, that means that the tooling is taking over for managing the class path. We are asking Grails what is the class path, so you don't have to manage it yourself. And we've got a build.gradle file. Something you want to open when you're working with Grails projects is the Grails task view. So we select a project, and then you'll see it's already got a bunch of tasks in. A lot of these ones are the default tasks you inherit from Grails. So these aren't ones particular to your project, they're kind of common utility tasks you might want to run. One example of that is running tests. So I've narrowed down that with a filter, and I can just double click it to run the tests for this project that were generated for it. And a build results folder appears, and in there I can see the tests for this project. So that worked fine. Now when working with the project, we've got a little bit of editing support in here. So I can create a new task like $2GX. Oops, I think I already got that. Okay, so I've added a new task, but it won't have appeared on this list yet. And that's because we don't dynamically update this list because it involves running the Grails script to work out the new tasks, and that can be an unbounded operation. We don't know how long that's going to take. So if you make edits like that, you have to click the refresh. So rebuild the Grails model. A new task is there. I can run that, and it will say hi from S12GX. Okay. But to show you it's doing something real, let me run another task that's defined in here. Upload archives, which is going to build a distribution of our little product, and it doesn't upload it anywhere. It creates it on the flat file system. It creates it here in the repos folder. And what I want to do here is create a task that's going to create the sources jar that goes along with that. So it's a jar-related task, and it depends on the classes. We call this sources, and it's going to use not all the sources, just the main sources, so I don't want the tests in there. And then I'm going to include from there, I include this test archive in what we produced by upload archives. So I've defined all that, click that refresh, make sure it picks up the latest, and rerun our upload archives. And you can see I just added that little bit of code, and now we have got a sources jar. That's all I had to do to have a sources jar alongside my distribution jar. Just to show you a bit of content assist, we've got a DSLD in place for Groovy Eclipse, if you're familiar with that. If you're working with a DSL, which kind of what Grails is, it makes editing, it gives you coded assist when you're working with a DSL. So I can do things like create a goodbye task. You see it depends on. Let's depend on the hello task. And if I do things like, I can do a do last and take a closure action there. Let's print goodbye. And again, I need to do the refresh to make sure the model's built, and then I can run the goodbye task. So there's more to do on the editing support. There's some basic content assist there, but the Grails guys are really good about documentation, so if I hover over some of these references to work out what on earth they are, I get some good stuff, and I can follow links and get pages and pages of stuff to read if I'm interested about how to build my Grails scripts up. So that's how you can get started playing around with the tool. But typically what you want to do is import an existing project. So you've cloned a Git repo, you know it's a Grails project, and you want to import it. So we have an import wizard. And so I pointed at a location, and then I have to press this build model button. because we can't just look at the file system to see what needs importing, because the Gradle script can dynamically build the set of projects that we need to import. So we have to run that script. So I'm importing Spring integration here. And where we spend a bit of time lately is working down here on the import options. Something you can see is the ability to run tasks before and after import. And you might say, well, why do I need that? And I talked about this API being a bit behind the curve. And the problem is that, as an example, consider if the projects were Groovy projects. The tooling API doesn't currently tell us or give us a way to know that it's a Groovy project. So we don't know inside STS whether to add the Groovy builder to it. So what we provide as a workaround for that until they add it is you can run the Eclipse task before import. And what that will do is the Eclipse task will create the right metadata on there. We won't damage it during the import, we'll leave it alone. And then when it comes in, the project will have all the right builders set up. So let me kick that off. I'll talk about this option while it's importing. Enable dependency management. Another kind of deficiency in the API is that it doesn't give us all the information about the class path. Some people spend a lot of time in that build.gradle file crafting a beautifully wonderful class path with lots of attributes about exclusions, etc. And that information is just not available to us. And if we started managing your class path for you and we didn't know that, we're just not going to build the project properly. So we offer a kind of containerless mode where we say, okay, we'll let the script manage the class path, we'll import the projects, and we'll let you run tasks against it, but if you want to change the class path, you're going to have to rerun that Gradle script. So it's now importing, and I imported all the projects there, including the root. It was a hierarchical project structure, and Eclipse doesn't support hierarchical project structures. So we import all the modules as peers in the peer projects in Eclipse, and the root one just has some exclusion filters applied so that it doesn't look like the sub-projects are there twice, like once in their own right and once underneath the root. The exclusion filters on the root hide them. This takes a while. It takes even longer if your Maven cache isn't populated. And I can go down to... Is that going to refresh for me? Yeah. So if I can just pick one. Spring Integration FTP project and run the tests on that project. Yeah, that all works great. So those are the two kinds of way to get started with Gradle. You can import your existing project, and we put some smarts in there to try and do the right thing for you. And if you're sharing your project with a group of people through Git, we actually persist the configuration of those flags on the import wizard. So if you spend a bit of time working out, well, I need to run these two tasks on import and these two after import, once you've got that all right, you can share that metadata through your Git repo so other people in your team can just fire up the wizard and all the options are set right and just get going with your project. So that's it for working with Gradle, and we're evolving that API as quickly as we can. So we talked about the various different projects, STS, Groovy, Grails, Gradle, Cloud Foundry. But now to step back a bit and talk about what we're going to deliver over the next little while. Martin kind of alluded to this. Something that works well for us is that just behind the Eclipse releases coming out, we do our stuff and you get a STS and GGTS based on it. We've been following this model for a while. It seems to work quite well. So you can expect 3.2 in March, somewhere in that. The Eclipse releases kind of coincide with their conferences. So around EclipseCon Europe in March, you'll see a GGTS STS 3.2. And then the main release in the summer, we'll have a 3.3 out shortly after that. And then the first service refresh will get a 3.4 out. But that doesn't mean you have to wait that long to get hold of new stuff. Every release has 2 or 3 milestones that we put together, and we make those publicly available for anyone wanting to follow that. They get a full release test cycle internally before we put those out, new and noteworthy docs on what's in there. So there's always, every 6 weeks or so, you can get a new version to play with. But that doesn't mean you have to wait that 6 weeks to get something. We have nightly builds happening all the time. If we need to get a fix to you, if you want to try something out really urgently, you can just use the update sites. Those are not full distributions, but you can just point your existing GGTS at an update site and pick up a fix very, very quickly. Martin talked a little bit about contributing. I'm just going to spend one slide on it. They're all open source now, so if you have any bugs, you can fix them yourselves. That'd be great. We want to make that as easy for you to participate in the process as possible. So we're not just dumping them on GitHub and saying, give us pull requests. We know that working with Eclipse projects is quite a steep learning curve. So we're working as hard as we can on making the docs around contributing. We're fleshing those out. We're describing to you how to set up a development environment, how to download the tests, how to get the tests running to make it as easy as possible for you to fix the problems you've got and maybe give us a pull request. Those are great. There is a contributor level agreement you have to sign. You're not signing your life away. It's a little thing you have to sign before you can send in your first pull request. But that isn't the only way to contribute. We love it when users jump on the forum and answer each other's questions. So anyone who wants to do that, that's great. Or even, Andrew mentioned that the Grails Maven support was a highly voted feature, and that's what brought it up our radar to the top thing we were going to implement next. So if you want something implemented, get it in a Jira. If it's already in a Jira, add your vote to it, and then we can prioritize as appropriate. So homing in on 3.2, that coming release in March, you can expect Milestone 1 around December, and then Milestone 2 around February. So now we're going to talk a little bit about what's in these coming milestones. So Martin, what's in from a Spring point of view?
Hello. Thanks. Yeah, what's coming up in the next releases for the Spring tooling? First of all, we will improve the live beans graph feature a lot. So it's a very, very early version that's out there at the moment, and we will work a lot on that, making the whole experience a lot easier and a lot better, and provide a lot more features on that. So I expect to see more on that soon. We will also continue to work on improving the Spring tooling for annotation-based configurations. I already mentioned the Spring Integration 2.2 support, of course. We are always working on improved performance, so improving tiny little things and making things better. So whenever you see something that is sluggish or is not working as fast as it should be in your workspace, let us know. Please also maybe with some kind of reproducible test projects or whatever, if that's possible. That would be awesome and help us a lot to improve those things. And we also continue to improve a lot of small things here and there. So all over the place we have a lot of issues where people ask for, or this tiny little thing here, and it would be nice if you could this and that there. We continuously improve all the projects all over the place for the Spring stuff. And for the Cloud Foundry side, we continue to improve the support for the new V2 features of the Cloud Controller for organizations and spaces. And we will also work on making life easier when you connect to a running service, like you connect to a MySQL service, to automatically hook up your existing MySQL tools, for example, that you're running locally on your machine, to that tunnel. So you don't need to put in password and username yourself and configure everything. You can just then use your existing tools, and they get automatically connected to the tunnel that you created with the SDS tooling. And we try to do that for all kinds of different tools, and also let you configure your own tools for that as well. And of course, more to come. Whatever comes up in cloudfoundry.com or in other Cloud Foundry versions, we are eagerly waiting for that and supporting that as well with the next versions. And the release cycle for the Cloud Foundry support is a little bit more aggressive. We are not shipping new milestones every 6 weeks. We are just shipping new releases of that plugin every 6 weeks to keep up with the latest development in Cloud Foundry itself.
Okay, thanks Martin. And on the Groovy Grails side, at Groovy at the moment we've got a lot of little issues around formatting, and a lot of people are very fussy about formatting, so Andrew's doing a bunch of work to make that better. As of last week, we've got a lot of problems with the latest Groovy 2.05, whatever it is, and compile static support, so I need to, when I get back, do some work on that. On the Grails side, we want to make a smoother experience when you're running commands. At the moment, whenever you want to run a command, we kind of fire up a JVM, load up the Grails runtime, and then run your command. And it takes multiple seconds to do that. It's very tedious. So with two things we're looking at doing there. One is that we want to try and reuse the JVMs that are running the commands. If we can tidy up enough after a command run so that it won't damage what happens next, we want to reuse that and give you a fast experience. And the other thing is we've seen some people don't like to use the pop-up command wizard that we have. They just want to run kind of like a console like they do when they're running Grails outside. So we've taken, I've got a little screenshot here that doesn't show up very well. there's an open source component that's a console view, and we're looking to integrate that and patch it up to Grails. And that console view understands things like the control characters that are being used to set the colors and the pretty printing. So we're hoping we can support some of that and give you a smoother Grails experience if that's your way you want to work. Whoops, wrong laptop. On the Gradle side, we're looking at something about better management of multi-project setups. At the moment, if you import multiple projects and they depend on each other, those dependencies can manifest as jar dependencies, and that means you make a change in one, you can't see it in the other until you do a full build and publish of the first project, and that's a bit tedious. And we want to do something around automatically. If we recognize that situation, we want to automatically turn those into project dependencies. Now, there's multiple ways we have to deal with here. There's Maven, Gradle, 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 Maven. We've got one of them working, Maven Gradle, I think. So Gradle projects can depend on Maven projects. But the Gradle case doesn't work at the moment. And we need some more, as I talked about, this tool API is a bit behind. We need some support from that API to make that possible. And then I don't know how many of you saw a session we did, the three of us did yesterday on the scripted code editor. But alongside STS and GGTS, this is just something we're playing with. If you're doing any HTML or JavaScript stuff, maybe you want to play around with our new editor that's optimized for that. This is completely outside of Eclipse. We're looking at tools, creating a lightweight tool like a VI TextMate experience for when working on JavaScript projects, because we think that's how people want to work on JavaScript projects. They want something lightweight and fast. So there's a link there if you want to play around with that. And I wrote an article on blog.springsource.org if you want to play around. So just to summarize what we've talked about today, we talked about the huge amount of work we put into componentization and open sourcing. That wasn't just a matter of saying, hey, let's dump it all on GitHub, then other people can fix our problems. We put a lot of effort in putting it up there, something good. And then we built multiple distributions from those components. And Martin talked about the Spring tools and the Cloud Foundry tools. Andrew talked about the Groovy and Grails features we've been adding. And then I talked about the Gradle tools. And we spent a bit of time on where we're going, what you can expect over the next few months. So with that, that's the end of the talk. There's a link up there to our forum. The forum is where we discuss everything we've talked about today. Oh, actually, I think there is a separate Cloud Foundry forum, isn't there? Is there?
For the Cloud Foundry stuff, I think there's a separate forum on the Cloud Foundry site itself where you can ask questions.
Well, there is. I'm just noticing that your documentation, the README points to now defunct support.
Okay.
Ah.
We'll get that fixed. Yeah. But if you have questions on STS, GGTS, then that forum is a place to go, and we manage it all under a single issue tracker on springsource.com. A couple of links there, but really if you just Google STS download, you'll find it. It's not rocket science. So with that, we're happy to take questions, or if you want to come up and grab us, that's fine.
And before you run away, I would also like to call up Peter to make a quick announcement, a quick question that he would like to do at the end of the talk. And I think we're also available here.
Yeah, we'll be around for a little while.
So feel free to grab us in the lobby and ask questions all the time. Peter?
Thank you very much, Martin. So folks, could you raise your hand if you're using Groovy Grails tool suite, please? Excellent. Okay. If any of you are interested, please see me afterwards. Paul Krill from InfoWorld, who's a fairly big writer on the development space for InfoWorld, is looking for Groovy Grails tools users. He's putting together a little piece, slideshow type of thing that he's working on InfoWorld, and would like to speak to someone who's a user. So if that might result in some extra press coverage for you and your company. So if you're interested in that, please talk to me afterwards. I'll be sitting right here. Would love to speak to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Peter. So,
thank you.
Any questions? I guess we were so comprehensive that you have no questions.
There's one thing I want to mention, actually, that I didn't mention during my demo. The Maven support will only work on Grails 2.1.1 or later. So,
okay,
that's it.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.